Streets of Rage was based on my average night out at the weekend and my drunk quest to find a kebab as I smashed my way through endless punks. I mean, what a simple but brilliant game. Now, Streets of Rage was a better version of a game called Renegade, which in itself was a cult hit and based on the film The Warriors, where a gang has to fight their way home. Renegade was an arcade classic which saw you beat up gangs of punks from the subway to the pier, and it was a good game released on all home computers, but Streets of Rage was a much better version. In fact, Streets of Rage was the 2D quintessential side-scrolling beat-em-up, which was so popular in those days. I mean, games like Streets of Rage, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Final Fight were all over the arcades at the time. The basic idea of Streets of Rage was just to beat the shit out of gangs of punks. You had 3 playable characters, each with their own fighting style, and you just bashed your way through thugs, and then took down the end-of-level boss. It was classic gaming, 2D, side-scrolling, button-bashing, punk-thrashing arcade action. On top of which, if things got too tough, you could call in the artillery and blow the crap out of everything on screen. In many ways it was similar kind of gameplay to Golden Axe, in terms of its style. You just beat everyone up and used your special attack to wipe out anything in your way. You could also pick up weapons, from bars to knives, even beer bottles. These days you get a lot of 2D retro games, like the brilliant Huntdown, which tried to recreate the style of these classic fighting games. And taking out different gangs and end-of-level bosses has always been a winning formula. Streets of Rage had 3 sequels, Streets of Rage 2 and 3, and of course the most recent Streets of Rage 4, which was in keeping with the retro 2D style, which has become so popular again in more recent times. In fact, it seems we can't help wanting to go back to a more simpler gaming time. A brilliant time where you just walked about beating up 2D punks in classic early 90s style. Plus kicking and punching guys in the face and then hitting them with a giant suplex never gets old. In fact, the simple formula of these games has come full circle, with games like Huntdown taking us back to the glory days of 2-dimensional ass kicking. And I for one love it, because in the end all the best fighting games have been 2D games. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Streets of Rage, they all shined in their day and still pack a punch these days. And Streets of Rage was one of the very first, and it's become a symbol of gaming itself. In many ways, Streets of Rage is the ultimate arcade game. Simple, addictive, 2D, ass-kicking fun. It seems as games get bigger and better, we long for some simplistic 2D ass-kicking. But Streets of Rage was limited by the technology of its day. I mean, years later we have full-on 3D fighting games, but it seemed we never lost our love for the 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. In fact, there is something very special about these early games. They are burned into gaming legend, and in time will be full-on collector's pieces. But the fact is, a good game is a good game, and even though 2D games were limited by the technology of the time, they found a great formula for delivering an ass-kicking experience that had kids shoveling their pocket money into arcade machines. Recently found myself playing Streets of Rage the other day. And even with all the great graphics we have in modern games, I still enjoy beating up punks and throwing them in a big hole, and kicking a fat, fire-breathing bald wrestler in the face. Because you can't beat some basic button-bashing, punk-slapping 2D action. No huge storyline, no complex ray tracing or frame rate issues, no, just full-on, basic beat-em-up action. fact, if you made a list of the top 10 greatest arcade games, Streets of Rage would be in the top 5 of anyone's list. At least it should be, because even though it ripped off Renegade, which was based on the film The Warriors, the fact is Streets of Rage was the better game, and the sequels stayed true to the 2D style. And that in itself is surprising, because many other classic games tried to change their style to fit in with the modern era, and those games fell on their ass. I mean, Street Fighter 3D or Mortal Kombat 3D never really worked, because it's the 2D style that made the game. In the end, Streets of Rage followed the winning formula of levels, end of level bosses, and then the big final boss. It's a tried and tested formula that never fails, and with its punk punching, bone crunching, face kicking, back breaking, super suplex style, you can't go wrong with Streets of Rage. In the end, the game went from an arcade coin-munching masterpiece to a huge hit on consoles. I remember playing it on Mega Drive and loving every ass-kicking minute.